Well, we're back with some more Jurassic Park stuff, and this time we are going to talk about the Lost World Jurassic Park era of Jurassic Park video games. And to start things off, we're going to start with the video game, The Lost World Jurassic Park, which is an adaptation of the, I guess you could say it's an adaptation of the movie very loosely, but you get the gist of it. In this game, you start out as the Compy, or the Compsognathus, and then you play your way through a cast of other characters. You can play the Compsognathus, the Velociraptor, the Human Hunter, the Tyrannosaurus, and eventually Sarah Harding, which in the game they dub as Human Prey. Now, the game is pretty difficult, and I'm not gonna lie, when I was a kid, I actually struggled playing it because of the difficulty, especially with the early Compy levels. I mean, geez, some of those were hard, especially the hardest part I had with the game when I was a kid was trying to play as the Compy and trying to make it through the level where you have all the Brachiosauruses just stomping down, and yeah, that was a nightmare as a child. I mean, look at that cute little fella. He's just a little Compsognathus. I mean, and he's really, like, fierce. He takes on prey bigger than him. And I think the funniest thing I remember as a child is he kind of does this little side, like, moonwalk. And he's like, eek, eek, when he goes backwards. And I will never forget that. And let us not forget, it also had a Sega Saturn version. And not only did it have a Sega Saturn version, when it was released as part of the Greatest Hits line for PlayStation, it had a special edition, which basically the game was more difficult than the original game. And not only that, but it also added a level at the beginning of the game where it takes place in 1993, and you play as the Tyrannosaurus. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, yes, we're still using the dinosaur egg grading scale from the last time we covered Jurassic Park videos. I give this one an 8. It's fun to play, it's difficult, and, you know, it's one of those games that you will decide whether it's too difficult for you and you bail out early, or it's just the right amount of difficult. It depends on what kind of games you enjoy. So I give this one an 8 out of 10. Next up is The Lost World Jurassic Park for Sega Genesis. And I know what you're thinking. This game came out for Sega Genesis? Yes, absolutely. And it's kind of obscure because it was released so late in the life cycle of the Sega Genesis. Actually, it was some of the very last titles before the Sega Genesis, before new games were discontinued in 1998. Basically, the goal of the game is to pretty much travel around Site B, or Isla Sorna as it's known, and capture dinosaurs as well as complete missions. There's also this level where you're shooting at a giant velociraptor. I think it's supposed to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but somewhere I'm guessing, in a department somewhere at Sega, or I'm pretty sure it was Alpaloosa who developed this. They made the mistake, and of course the CGI looks kind of cool even on the Sega Genesis, which it's impressive to this day. Well, not really CGI, but 3D model, I guess you could say. Actually, that's what it is, a 3D model, and it looks pretty impressive on the Sega Genesis. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 7. It's pretty fun. It's not as good as the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn one, but I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you like Sega Genesis games. It can be completed in a single sitting. You don't have to take too long. It may take you over an hour or so, but actually I think it takes you about 2 hours, depending on how fast you play. But I think you'll enjoy it, and basically it was one of the very last Sega Genesis titles, so it's pretty collectible now from what I understand. So this one gets a 7 out of 10. Now we're going to take a look at the Sega Game Gear version of The Lost World Jurassic Park, and it's a pretty good platformer, to be honest. It had a very similar vibe to the original Jurassic Park game for Sega Game Gear, but there's not really much you can say about it. And I know that's pretty surprising, but it's just one of those games that you can only talk about so briefly that it's not really worth having a whole intelligent conversation about. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 6. It's not too great. It's a pretty decent, basically it's a platformer, and if you like platformers, bully for you. I kind of didn't enjoy it. It felt kind of repetitive to me, but that's just me. So I give this one a 6 out of 10. Next up is The Lost World Jurassic Park for the Nintendo Game Boy. And yes, it was developed by THQ, which is surprising because they had never done, any other Jurassic Park video games that I know of. Just like the other game, it's a side-scrolling platformer, and just like it, there's not really much you can say. The thing about it is, I think I actually disliked this one more than I liked the Sega Game Gear version, and honestly, I don't think it's a very good game. Of course, you may have another opinion of it. Of course, it being a Nintendo Game Boy game, and of course its limitations compared to some of the other systems, but I just could not find myself enjoying this game. So, on a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 4. It's not really enjoyable, it's repetitive. If you like collecting Game Boy games, I definitely recommend picking it up, but other than that, it's more or less just a shelf filler or collector fodder. It's not really worth playing unless you want to play it for the nostalgia value of it. Now here's one you've probably never heard of, the Gamecom Handheld by Tiger Electronics. And this is the Lost World Jurassic Park for it, which the Game.com was very short-lived, and it's just one of those game systems that's completely forgotten about. And I'm debating whether it should really be considered a game system or not. As you can see, it's black and white, but it's basically more low quality than what you would get on a standard Game Boy. This game is more terrible than the Game Boy version, and it's basically similar to side-scrolling platformer, and it's basically you're doing the same thing, it's just the game's laid out differently. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 2. It's repetitive, it's terrible. I don't know of anybody who would want to play this game. It would only be good as collector's fodder. So, 2 out of 10. That's all I can say about that one. And just when you thought it would get any worse, here comes another Tiger Electronic thing. The version of the Lost World Jurassic Park for the RZone. The RZone was considered a game system of sorts, a portable game system, and it basically had the screen and everything built in. It was basically a side-scrolling platformer on an LCD screen. Let me just stop right there. There's not much more you can say about this game. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, it's not even on the scale. I mean, if I have to go be fair, I would rate it as, I would give it a rating and rate it as a 1. It is definitely a rotten egg, and this one should be avoided at all costs unless you're a collector and you need some collector's fodder. Now we're going to get into something a little better. This is the Lost World Jurassic Park for the arcade, and this was made by Sega and developed by Sega in 1997, and it is actually a really fun game, and it comes in 2 versions. You can buy just the standard stand-up light gun arcade, or you can buy a version of it with the moving seats, which I did not play this one. I actually played the stand-up one, as you've seen just a moment ago. Basically, you have to shoot velociraptors, dilophosaurus, compies, and I actually remember playing this. I never did play it at an arcade. The first time I played it was in 2003. I knew it existed, Never knew where to play one. I actually played it for the first time in 2003 at a A&W restaurant, and I absolutely loved the game. Not quite as fun as the original Jurassic Park arcade game that Sega made in 1994. It's a lot more challenging, but I found it pretty enjoyable. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 9. You'll find it challenging yet fun, and I don't think you'll have any complaints with this one, unless your parents gave you a RZone or a Game.com for Christmas in 1997. Alright, the next game is Chaos Island: The Lost World Jurassic Park for PC, more specifically Windows 95, or if you bought it afterwards, Windows 98. Basically, to be honest, this game was nothing more than Command and Conquer. You basically complete missions and all that jazz. There's not really much you can say about it, except it's similar to Command and Conquer, and if you want to compare it to anything else, Dune 2000. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one an 8.5. Surprisingly, it's fun. I love Command and Conquer style games. This is one of them I love, especially the theme. And if you love old PC games like I do, I'm sure you'll love this one. So I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. The next game on our list is Jurassic Park Trespasser, or The Lost World Jurassic Park Trespasser, or just simply Trespasser. This game had a really troubled development cycle. It had constant delays and is regarded as simply a terrible game, but it's either one of those games that you either really love or really hate. As for its troubled development cycle, it constantly was delayed, and simply on some PCs of the era in 1998, it just would not run. Basically, the game was ahead of its time when you really think about it, and it was just one of those games that it had an amazing environment when you think about it. And actually, to this day, it has a huge modding community. It has since at least the early 2000s. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I'm actually going to give this one a 7. It's one of those games that it's a legend of itself, and in and of itself, and without it, other developers wouldn't have learned of mistakes and all that jazz about making games and physics. That actually, its physics system was ahead of its time. So there we have it for Trespasser. Now we have one more game left to take a look at, and that game is Warpath Jurassic Park, which was released in 1999 and is the last game of the Lost World Jurassic Park era. And surprisingly, it's a pretty good game, and one game that I always liked. Basically, it's a fighting game. I guess you could compare it to Tekken or Street Fighter, or however you want to compare it. But basically, you pick your dinosaur and you fight other dinosaurs. And you completed, a certain chain of fighting different dinosaurs, and that's pretty much it. And also cool, very cool fact, there's actually a pre-JP3 Spinosaurus in the game, and it's based on the actual toy that Kenner made for Jurassic Park and the Lost World Jurassic Park, which is pretty cool that they included that pre-JP3 Spinosaurus. I wonder if they really, knew that the design, that they were changing the design purposely, if there was such a canon to it, but we'll leave that for another day. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one an 8. It's a pretty decent fighting game, and I love the theme, dinosaurs fighting, which there's some other dinosaur fighting games out there if you look around on the internet, especially for older gaming consoles and for the arcade. But it's a pretty nice game, and I like it. So I give this one an 8 out of 10. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and soon we will cover the JP3 era of games, and then eventually what we call the revival era, the era between JP3 and Jurassic World, and then eventually the Jurassic World games. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell if you want notifications of other awesome videos that we do. And until next time, I'll see ya. Take care.